Awesome. So I'll just do a quick intro and then we'll pass it off to Margaret and the panelists. Most of you are Odyssey members, but for those who aren't, just a quick background. I was a first generation college student trying to break into finance. I found it really difficult, and finally through a lot of work and a lot of luck, I found a mentor who really had a huge impact on my career trajectory, but also my life trajectory. And Odyssey is about helping facilitate those connections. So we have professionals come on, they list 30-minute office hour slots. And for all underrepresented students, it's totally free. You just come on, it's click to book. You can have a career conversation and then a double opt-in mentoring relationship. And then around that, we have exclusive opportunities and awesome events like this one. And this one is really in thanks to Margaret Davidson, who I'll let her introduce herself and kind of the program that we're working with on this one.
Hi all, my name is Margaret and I'm a Columbia Business School student, and I'm part of the Athena Fellowship here. So we partner with wonderful organizations and companies to bring speakers to events like these, so we can share our knowledge and also learn ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and just intro our wonderful panelists, Erica, Jenny, and Rob. So Erica Diegnan-Minahan is a founder and GP at Rain Ventures, which is a VC focused on women and minority founders, and 1,000 Angels. Before Rain and 1,000 Angels, she was managing director of Dream It Ventures, an early stage venture investor and accelerator. Erica was also the first executive director of Golden Seeds, one of the largest angel networks in the country, dedicated to funding companies with at least one woman in a management role. She has an MBA from Columbia Business School and a BS from UCLA. Also with us is Jenny Fielding. Jenny is the managing director of TechStars New York City Accelerator, where she leads the program. She's also the founder of The Fund, a first check fund investing in local founders, and she's written first checks to more than 140 companies. Previously, she ran corporate venture at BBC Worldwide and has founded several companies, including Switch Mobile. Jenny is also an adjunct professor and alum of Columbia University. Rob Hayes, also with us. Rob joined First Round as a partner in 2006, and over the past 15 years, he has led investments in Uber, Mint.com, Square, Eero, Planet Labs, and Bowery, among others. Before First Round, Rob was the first venture investor at Omidyar Network, a firm started by eBay founder Pierre Omidyar. Before that, Rob worked at Palm, where he produced and managed Palm OS during the heyday of Palm products. Rob has an MBA from Columbia University and a BA from the University of California, Berkeley.
Awesome. Thank you, Margaret, for the introductions. And thank you all for being here. Very excited. I think a good way to kick this off, we did get a lot of questions through the registrations and throughout. If anybody wants to throw something in the chat, if we have a chance to get to it, we definitely will. But a good place to start is just if each of the panelists can kind of share a quick personal story about how you got where you are today and kind of what led you down that path. I don't know if anybody in particular wants to pick that up first.
I'll start. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead, Erica.
I'll start. Hey, everybody. It's so good to see you all. Thank you, Brian and Margaret, for organizing this. This is going to be a really fun session. It's kind of funny because my oldest child, my son, is 21 years old, and, he's in college and he's trying to figure out, how he's going to get a job. And as I was like thinking back to, when I got my first job in finance and investment banking when I was 21 years old, I had actually had 7 years of work experience up to that point. So it's a very long story. And, I think that at the end of the day, like getting anywhere in life, takes a lot of investment of time and energy. And it's just a really long slog to even get, your first break in finance. So, my adult career, which started off in investment banking, I spent about 8 years doing traditional investment banking at firms like Solomon Smith Barney, which actually became Citigroup the year I was there, Credit Suisse First Boston, and Cantor Fitzgerald. So it was a lot of kind of, like, I know there's that big meme going around about the Goldman kids working like 90 hours a week, but I was like, yeah, that's, that indentured servitude is basically how you, start off your career. So very familiar with that, sort of learning how to work and how to work hard and really focus. I was very fortunate that in 2006, around the time that the housing crisis was kind of fomenting in the capital markets. I was actually the ABS trader at Cantor Fitzgerald. So I was actually responsible for trading the CDOs, CMBS, all of the, really complicated securitized home equity backed product that actually ended up bringing down the financial markets. And as I was doing it, it was really funny because when I was at Columbia, my favorite classes were like, equity derivatives and options markets. And I just really loved all this really complex stuff. But when I actually got into the market and was trading, I was like, wow, I don't think any of these people went to Columbia Business School or business school period. And I also don't think they actually read any textbooks on this. And actually, I don't think any of the people buying this product like understand, how you actually value these things or how complicated they are. And I would call my mom and, just practically, cry and be like, I traded a big block of like, tens of millions of dollars of mortgages today that were backed by people's trailer homes. And I was like, just something about it just feels off and wrong. And, I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew that, somehow I was involved in something where, I couldn't clearly see my role. And, I really wanted to feel better about what I was doing. So at this point, I had actually just had my youngest daughter, my third child. And, after maternity leave, I felt like if I'm going to go back to work, I really want to do something, that I can feel good about ethically, and also that has more transparency. So I can really see the impact of the role that I'm playing in the financial system. And I was kind of going on the coin, I think it's still called coin, where you find, part-time jobs or a job or whatever. And I just got very lucky that this woman, Stephanie Hanbury Brown, who had been the COO of the sales and trading at JP Morgan, was just starting this brand new investor group called Golden Seeds that, had this crazy idea to only invest in women-led companies. And so she hired me, at first kind of like as a part-time 20-hour-a-week, person for a few weeks, which was great because I just had my daughter. And after a few weeks, I actually started there full-time as executive director. So that's actually how I got into venture. I had no idea what venture was, really up until this date. But what I did really love about it was I was like, wow, instead of being, sort of taking companies public or doing debt placements or, being on the trading side or asset management, where there are all these machinations going on where you can't really clearly see the, ultimate effect of what you're doing. I loved that at the very early stage of investing, it was like, wow, well, we're putting $1 million into this company, and here's exactly what they're going to do with it. And like, I can see all the people that are, taking the money and doing something with it. So I really just fell in love with the asset class and the stage, and, built my career. I actually took a few years off to do my own startup, not because I was, I had a really good startup idea, but more so because I knew that to be a good venture investor and feel credible, I felt that I had to have my own experience doing a startup. So I've actually, in the 15 years that I've been an early stage investor, I've actually started 2 of my own companies. A D2C wellness company that I started in 2008 and sold in 2012. And then about 5 years ago, I started a digital investor platform called 1,000 Angels, which, for me is a hybrid between, an operating company as well as, a way to make investments. So, I really have appreciated the opportunity not only to operate as an investor, but to really kind of understand the struggle from the founder side. My long-term goal was always to have my own fund. I was really fortunate that about 9 years ago, I met somebody who I knew would be an ideal partner in a fund. So we started investing together, building a track record, to eventually go out and raise institutional capital. And luckily, we've finally been able to do that this year, turning Rain Ventures into, the Rain Ventures Fund. Which is super exciting. And, we're really thrilled. We've, gotten investment from great backers like Google and Bank of America and some other really fantastic individuals. So, I think that like you learn so much in a venture capital career, but it's like learning how to do the investments, but then also learning how to raise money for a fund. Like it's almost like you're constantly leveling up in your skills and facing new challenges. And so I think that that's why people really, really love and appreciate a career in this industry. So a little bit of my background.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. Rob, did you want to go?
Sure. A lot of different paths into venture. Mine was, in kind of late 99, 2000, when the internet bubble was the first internet bubble was happening. And I was a product manager at this company called Palm for all the software and these Palm devices that, maybe your parents had. And we were doing an IPO. And at the time, every IPO that was happening, there was this question of what you were going to do with all the money you were going to raise. And many companies were saying, we're going to do a corporate venture fund. And so that's something that Palm was saying. And so we had the IPO, and it was at the time a very successful IPO. And then the CEO started scratching his head and saying, I said, I'm going to do this venture fund. And I have no idea how to do that. And the discussion was not quite this simple, but it was almost as simple, which is at the same time, I had let people know that I would be leaving Palm relatively soon and going and either starting a company or joining an early stage company or something like that. And the CEO approached me and said, hey, Rob, you have this MBA from this place called Columbia. Do you want to start our venture our internal, corporate venture fund? And I said, sure, because I took lots of venture capital courses and know exactly what that means. And so I moved over to that role. It sat in the corp dev function. I launched the fund in April of 2000, which is an auspicious month to be launching a venture fund. Over the course, I was investing off the balance sheet. I didn't have a set aside fund. I think in 18 months, I did 5 deals, all of them terrible. I learned a lot about venture capital. I learned what I love about venture capital was working with companies, and that part of the business. I learned that I never wanted to do corporate venture capital again, but that was kind of how I learned about venture, became a venture capitalist, and learned that I love venture capital.
Awesome. Great story. Jenny, would you like to go?
Sure. Well, continuing on the theme of non-traditional paths, I am an accidental investor in that, I spent most of my time as an entrepreneur building companies and products. And, the way that I really got into investing was I started mentoring at this place called TechStars. Thought it was a really interesting way to give back and to meet companies, and ended up as a MD there. And I've been at TechStars for 7 years. I don't exactly think of myself as an investor. I mean, I think of myself as kind of like a coach, an advisor, someone that's really on the team of those kind of first, those early years for founders. And then a few years ago, I kind of saw a white space, especially in New York, around early stage, and did start a fund. And so now I kind of wear both hats, running an accelerator and running a fund, but definitely non-traditional in that, or maybe it's more traditional now, is that many founders become investors, but at the time, a little bit different background.
Awesome. Thank you, Jenny. One of the questions that's submitted, I think, is a good place to go after this, because you all had very different paths after school, but some people are asking, is there anything they can do in school to prepare themselves to break into venture capital, whether it's right after school or even later on down the road?
Yeah, I'm happy to continue. The way that I got into investing was really through relationships, right? So I was good at building relationships. I enjoyed working with companies. And the best way to build relationships is to, be out there in the network and to, just to get to meet a lot of people.
I'd say 45 people on this call don't have their cameras on, right? And so like you're missing an opportunity to connect to the panelists, right? And so getting a job is not going to be like, you're going to see this posted. Like VC jobs are never posted. It's all about who you know and how you kind of get to know people and value you can bring. And so this is a great opportunity to ask questions, have your cameras on, be engaged. And I think that's the way to get into venture capital. There isn't really a path of like, very few firms, can you kind of apply online, become an analyst and work your way to a general partner? Like we just don't see very many of those anymore, especially at the early stage. So the best way you can, do that is to engage in the ecosystem.
Awesome.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with what Jenny said. I mean, unfortunately, like one of the things that is different and I think a lot more challenging about this space is that, I thought it was funny. I think both Rob and Jenny said, like, I didn't come in through the traditional path. And I'm like, is there a traditional path into this business? I feel like everybody comes in from some like very random, coincidence. So in banking, it's like, okay, get into an analyst program, become an associate, or whatever, maybe get your MBA, become an associate, VP, director, et cetera. And I was having a conversation with somebody the other day and I said, like, honestly, the only qualification there is to be a VC is, do you have like, well, technically the first real one is, have you been able to convince some people to give you some money to invest on their behalf? Like that's the only qualification, right? And then the second one is maybe like, do you have some money that you can then invest? Technically you would be in the group. But, I think that Jenny hit the nail on the head that, this isn't kind of like, a lot of the firms where there's so much opportunity for somebody to get their firm in the door right now, to get their foot in the door right now are probably newer firms. And, you're like, if I sort of think about, how we're deciding whether or not to hire or who to hire, really kind of the first question is like, how can this person like be helpful to us in a way, that we haven't already gotten covered. So I think like really thinking about, what is sort of your, unique set of skills, right? Like Liam Neeson style that you can bring to this team that, might be an area, where they don't have a lot of strength and you can come in and really sort of hit the ground running. I think that, a lot of venture firms, particularly if they're smaller, it is operating almost a little bit like a startup, right? Where there's a lot of opportunity for everybody on the team to do a lot of interesting things. So, coming with like skills that you're not replicating that the team already has. And then secondly, I think another part of the big challenge is that, definitely, I would say in venture, you're not going to see necessarily, I've heard people sort of explain, particularly early stage, as a way to like get rich very slowly. I don't think there's the same kind of like compensation up front. These funds are like 10-year vehicles. So also to kind of like be prepared for that potential challenge as well.
Awesome. The only thing I would add to that, one of the things that I've seen a lot of different processes with a lot of different firms, and they are all very different. And no one like recruits at business school or anything like that. But the one thing that I see is common to all of those is getting back to Jenny's point about your network. It's not just your network in terms of knowing where the jobs are, but it's your network with companies. And so with potential companies to invest in. And so being able to show that you have a passion for working with, understanding, knowing all the most interesting companies that are being started in whatever particular field or market that you're interested in is wildly important. A lot, if you have the means to angel invest in companies, that's one of the things that is really great to do. But most people don't have those means, which is fine. But I think being able to come to the table and have leveraged your time at Columbia, the network that you built, and that sort of thing, with a set of companies that you think are interesting for the stage and the firm that you're talking to and that sort of thing. And especially companies that maybe they haven't heard, that the partners at that firm that are doing the hiring haven't heard of, is something that I've seen in every single process. And coming up empty there is not going to be helpful for you.
Right. Thank you, Rob. One question we got a few times, and I think Rob, it'd be good to follow up with you, and also Jenny. I think you both have kind of spoke to this, but people are asking if not doing finance beforehand is a big disadvantage. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. Neither of you coming from finance beforehand.
No, not at all. I mean,
yeah, my job is in finance. Like I barely, touch it. My job is looking at product, understanding market trends, and really, as the first check, it's really a people business, right? Like, do I feel like this person standing in front of me is going to go the distance? And so kind of understanding more about human psychology, I think, comes in more handy than finance.
And it really depends, I think, on what stage you invest at. So at the seed stage where we invest, I like to say the last time I opened a spreadsheet in anger, it was when I was in business school, right? And so, we're not modeling anything or, that sort of thing. I mean, I came into business school knowing nothing about finance, and I came out with finance concentration, mostly because I thought that, 25 years ago, what I considered to be the best professors were all finance professors. And I focus, when I'm in academia, I focus on the best professors, not necessarily, a certain academic path. And so just being able to read, financial statements was, I guess, sort of helpful. But if you're investing at a much later stage, growth stage, that sort of thing, there will be more modeling. It will be more helpful. You will actually open spreadsheets in anger. You will need to do a lot more financial diligence than you normally would at the stage that I invest in. But again, for me, it's all about the people. It's about the markets. Is the product something that I think is interesting, and it's much more, it's much more trying to see the future and just ever so occasionally being right.
That makes a ton of sense. And then on the flip side of that coin, this is a good question for Erica. Someone's asking, or a couple of people actually asked about the best way to segue out of investment banking, or how to use that effectively as a path into venture capital.
Yeah, well, so I guess I can speak from my own experience. So I think one of the reasons that I've been really fortunate to kind of be able to add a lot of value for the companies that I've worked with is that I am that person who lives to do spreadsheets. So, I think that has been something that's really of value. So, I also ran an accelerator. So I was a managing director at Dream Ventures, and my entire area of expertise was the capital strategy. So helping the companies make their financial models, making sure that they worked, they made sense, they were really good. A lot of founders don't know how to do that. So if that's something that you actually are really good at and really passionate about, and you can be helpful to them with, it's a really invaluable skill, because you'll see not everybody likes to do that. So if you are a person who that's really your passion, you really understand capitalization strategy really well, that's a value add that you could bring maybe to a team, that doesn't necessarily have somebody whose expertise is there. Or, for somebody like me, I'd love to have some, I would consider it an asset to have somebody on my team who kind of really understands, that aspect of the business. And, we don't have to kind of, learn how to look at the model from scratch. So there are a lot of interesting ways to segue, but I think that it is so important to sort of do the work to recognize that there is a vast difference between, the way that you look at companies from an investment banking perspective and how you look at them from a seed stage perspective, which is that, the way I like to describe it is at the seed stage, we're there to identify risk, but to take it, right? Not to use the risks as a reason to say no, but to identify what they are and, figure out whether or not they're appropriately priced and sort of how we're going to mitigate them. But the entire purpose of early stage investing is, that you're taking on certain risks and, if they pay off, that they work out. So to make sure that you go into it, with less of a banker attitude and more of okay, we're here to solve problems, not to, identify them, and sort of really understanding, that the business drivers, are so much more about, customer acquisition, marketing, a lot of different elements. So making sure that you retain your finance skills, but open up your mindset to realize that, you're in much more, as Jenny said, of like a people business world now, and just to let your capitalization, capital strategy knowledge support that.
Thanks. We had a question come in from Jack. Thank you for dropping that in. I guess aside from specifically the people building and the relationships that you can come in with, are there any other specific skills or competencies or classes that you recommend for people to work on and build that'd be helpful for VC in general?
I'll just jump in there with something that I realize that I would love right now is I actually think that there's all this really interesting kind of new software that's coming out there, like Coda and Notion and Airtable and all these things. And some of us older people are like, oh, what? So I certainly wish that I had like a young whippersnapper who'd done, all the work on this to come in and help me. So that's like a real time thing that I could say where it would be helpful. Now I like understand how my grandma felt when I told her it's super easy to use the iPhone. So yeah, learning new things can be challenging.
Awesome. Jenny or Rob, would you like to add anything to that?
I mean, I'll just say that, something that can be helpful as you're trying to kind of get into venture capital is just kind of coming up with a thesis and a point of view and really spending time on it and becoming an expert. I mean, most of us at the early stages have to be generalists, by nature of the mandates with our fund. But if you're someone that's like really interested in marketplaces and that's, what excites you, or a certain part of consumer or blockchain, becoming an expert, understanding who the players are, and then taking a point of view, which may or may not be right, but it's kind of a futuristic look, I think can distinguish you from other people. And then the second part of that is like, you need to then manifest that into the world, right? And so you should start writing blog posts and, becoming, I don't really love that term, but the kind of thought leader around it. And I think that's a real opportunity, is, get deep into something and then make some noise about it. So I think that's another way to, get a little bit of an edge as you're thinking about moving into a space like venture. And
in my career, what I've noticed, and I think a lot of my peers believe, is that you're going to get over time and over a career, you're going to get the best referrals from other founders that you've worked with. You're going to get a lot of referrals from a lot of people, but the best ones come from other founders that you've worked with. And I think that the most impact that I've had helping founders is, especially young founders, is helping them grow into the job as the job changes over the life of their company. And so for me, before I had 1,000 years of experience and basically totally gray head of hair, the classes that were actually helpful for me, in addition to kind of the skills classes, were some of the soft classes, especially the ones that were around leadership. And so there was a class that doesn't exist, I believe, anymore, called Turnarounds by a guy named taught by a guy named John Whitney, which was one of the best classes I've ever taken anywhere. And it was ostensibly about turnarounds, but it was really about leadership, and how to be a leader in a company. And so anything that you can bring to the table and helping founders grow as their companies grow, because the biggest challenge that founders have is they go from writing a code and being focused on a product, to figuring out how to grow a team, to figure out how to give away what it is that they're good at and let someone else do that, and how to run a company where they don't know anybody, they don't know everybody there anymore, and those are the real challenges I think that founders have in scaling, and anything you can bring to the table there is, I think, really helpful.
Great, thank you. Our next question that was submitted, this is going to change tracks a lot, but it's how fulfilling do you find your role as a VC? I don't know who would like to take that up first. But
I'll start it off. I think Erica, someone mentioned that this is a long game, and my arc over the last 7 years of investing has been, first few years were great. Exciting, new areas, like got to explore lots of things, great founder relationships. Companies were doing relatively well, lots of up rounds. Middle years were really awful. So a lot of my companies died, right? And at year 5.5 or year 5, I actually thought, you know what? Like, I don't know if I'm actually good at this. And I think that I might have to go back to operating because like I'm a type A overachiever and I'm not used to things not working out for me, like most of you on this call. So I kind of had a real like moment of like, maybe this isn't gonna work out. I do think that it's my life's work. And so that was kind of sad to me. And like, it wouldn't be about leaving tech, but it would be going back to starting a company. And, then kind of like in a moment, things like turned around. So my first my first 2 cohorts at TechStars, I now have 2 unicorns. Actually, one's going public at the end of this month and one is, a double unicorn. So like all of a sudden I felt more validated and I felt that, actually could do this job like pretty much as well as many people. And it kind of gave me like a boost of confidence. So like the real answer is it's like running a company. It's a lot of roller coasters, but it's not like this clear path to success. And so that impacted my sense of fulfillment, if I can be honest, right? Because, it's great to have founder relationships and, be good and, everyone thinks I'm doing a good job, but it's another thing to be validated with returns, right? And so until your returns kind of catch up to that, it can be a long time. So I don't know. I think you have to really decide that you want to do this for the next, decades, to have that kind of real fulfillment in the fullest way. So a little bit honest and raw, but that's kind of my experience.
Do you feel like it was?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Rob.
No, you go.
I was just going to ask if you feel like it was worth it at the end. That whole roller coaster.
I'm not at the end, but
it
did give me, I guess I'm just saying that like, you're going to go years and not know if you're good at something. And, you're going to see a lot of companies that you spend a lot of time with and you love, and you put your heart and soul in, not work out. And that's really hard for many people. It was for me. And you kind of take it out on yourself in many ways. And so, now that I'm seeing a portfolio that is flourishing in many ways, that's kind of giving me a renewed sense. So, is it worth it? I don't know. I'll ask you in a few more years. I'm still early in my portfolio. I'm not even at 7 years, so at 6.5 years. But it just takes a long time. So be ready for that.
And what I'll say is, I think it, in terms of fulfilling, it's the best career out there. But it depends on what parts of it you like. Like I really like working with companies, and in the early days of first round, I was the guy out on the West Coast and was doing all our deals out there, and started with exactly 0 companies and made my first investment and my second, and then my 10th, and then my 20th. And that part of the job I really, really love. But then as we scaled, we started hiring people. And so I went from 1 person in San Francisco. Today, there's 30 people in San Francisco. And you have all these junior people around, and now like they want partner time, and you're doing annual reviews, and you're raising money, and you're marketing, and you're all this stuff. And so I went to a place where I was spending 90% of my time, in investing in companies, sitting on boards, helping companies, that sort of thing, to probably closer to 30% of my time as you scale a firm and you're a leader in that firm and that sort of thing. And that's not the part of the job that I love, but that was the part of the job that was necessary if we wanted to get the firm to where it was going to go. And so a couple of years ago, when I had the opportunity to step into this board partner role, where again, now I'm doing is working with companies and that sort of thing, I have to tell you, when like I'm living my best life, and people see me and they're like, "Oh my God, you look so great." And I go, "Well, that's because I'm great, right?" And literally like a month ago, the email went out that it was like, "Hey everybody, it's time to do annual reviews," and I was just like, yes, I don't have to do this, and I'm so happy. And so, you're growing a company when you're building a firm, especially when you start a firm, you go through the stages that a founder goes through. I mean, they're very different, and you don't grow as big and you don't grow as quickly. And there are, as Jenny said, there's a very different type of like feedback loop, right? Whereas, as opposed to weekly and monthly and quarterly and annual goals, you don't know if you're any good at it for years. And some days you're on top of the moon, and some days you're in a very, very deep, dark place, right? But for me, finding the way to the place where you get to do what you enjoy is kind of the payoff for venture capital. And I think that there are people that don't like the investment part of it as much and don't like working with cranky, unreasonable, sometimes crazy founders, and prefer to work with LPs and raise money and manage people and all that kind of stuff. So just find what it is that you like to do, and as you have success, focus on being able to do just that.
Awesome. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, so I definitely feel that venture capital is like my soulmate. I feel really lucky that I've found something that, I can't imagine, and I've done a lot of different things, within finance, but I can't imagine anything that I would love more. And, the one thing that I just sort of want to remind people that I think makes it so interesting, and why sort of like even the more painful parts are great, because it really gives you an opportunity to grow, is that, there's a whole sort of set of skills that you need to conquer around being a good investor. So like, number one, obviously you've got to pick companies that are successful. I think about all the companies we've invested in, and Rob and Jenny definitely have like mentioned this and all this, but it is so challenging when, you're meeting somebody and they're literally just starting a company. There's no real evidence for anything. And you have to be like, okay, we're picking you, and it's like, build something, worth $100 million, within the next couple of years. And then they actually do it. You're kind of like, oh God, I can't believe that actually happened, right? It's like, you're putting yourself out there, I think, so much in having to make that decision. It always, feels shocking to me when like it actually happens. You're like, yay guys, we did it. So from that part, it's so beautiful. And then I think, the most important thing is that because it is a relationship business, you're investing so much of yourself emotionally in building these relationships where, founders know that they can trust you, that you have their back no matter what, that you're there to support them, that you're there to, help sort of smooth all the bumps in the road, however well you can, and that they can be honest with you, so it's a huge investment from the emotional side as well. And then I think the thing that's, very much overlooked is that most people think about venture capital and they're like, oh, great. So you're picking companies to invest in, but that's, almost like the easiest part of the job. What's really hard is actually going out there and raising money. And even the raising money part of it, which consists of, being rejected like 98% of the time, is so amazing because it's like such a challenging thing to do and, such an opportunity for growth. So I've even actually really loved that part of it. So the thing that's, I think really unique about venture is that you're probably going to have the opportunity to exercise a very wide variety of your skills and abilities all in one very fun and exciting job.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. I actually think that's a perfect spot to kind of wrap things up. And I just want to, now that we're hitting the 45-minute mark, and I just want to thank Jenny, Erica, and Rob for really, I think, doing a great job demystifying venture capital for a lot of people on the call. And I want to thank Margaret again for helping us set this up, and also thank everybody who showed up. Really appreciate it. And we'll send you a quick survey after this. And if you just can take it 1 second to fill it out, it helps us have more events like this. And I just want to really thank you all for showing up. And for Odyssey members, we have we're co-hosting a consulting case workshop with a McKinsey office in a couple of weeks. So just make sure you keep a lookout for that. But yeah, thank you all again for taking your time for this panel.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.